HIV/AIDS in the workplace. Effective date, revised effective. This policy applies to employee. It will be reviewed every 2 years. Human rights laws, employment legislation changes and/or any other conditions that may affect the provisions in this policy will be tracked, implemented and communicated to all employees. Policy introduction. The applicable provincial/territorial Human Rights Commission defines HIV/AIDS and other life-threatening and/or chronic illnesses as a disability. A disability, whether permanent, chronic, episodic and/or life-threatening, is a protected ground under the name of the applicable provincial/territorial human right law. The objective of this policy section is to explain the rights of the employee living and working with a disability as well as the employer's obligations towards employees living and working with a disability. Company has implemented a rights-based policy that includes HIV/AIDS and other disabilities as defined by name of the applicable provincial/territorial human rights law. Employee rights and employer obligations are entrenched in the name of the applicable provincial/territorial human rights law. For example, in Ontario, the Ontario Human Rights Code, and as such are the same regardless of the disability related to, for example, HIV/AIDS, cancer, hepatitis C, heart disease, epilepsy and/or multiple sclerosis. To that end, the policies are all encompassing under name of province/territory, human rights legislation in terms of disability as a protected ground, employee rights, and employer obligations. Support in the workplace. Company is a supportive work environment in which staff can discuss their health status free from discrimination, stigmatization or reprisal. To the extent requested and to the extent possible, company will encourage employees to seek out services and/or resources that are available in the community to assist any employee living and working with a life-threatening, chronic or episodic disability. Consultation is available to employees to assist with the effective management of health benefits and applicable leave as defined in the Personnel Policy Manual. Support for dependents with a life-threatening and/or chronic illness or episodic disability. It is recognized that employees may be caring for a dependent with a life-threatening or chronic illness. These employees are encouraged to discuss their situation with company, in order that they may be directed to state the Personnel Policy Manual and/or collective agreement as applicable, and/or to specific policies that are available to assist the employee with their circumstances. Confidentiality for the dependent and their health status must be respected at all times and will be in accordance with company confidentiality policy. Training and education for policy implementation. As part of the workplace commitment to this policy, training and education will be provided to managers or supervisors who have responsibility for employees. This training will focus on the rights of employees and the obligation of the employer with respect to disabilities in the workplace, as well as policy implementation. The preamble of the name of the applicable provincial/territorial human rights law. As part of the training and education process, all employees and any new employees working at company will be introduced to this policy with specific emphasis on making a request for reasonable accommodation and workplace support that is available. Definitions. Disability. The name of the applicable provincial/territorial human rights law provides a basic definition of disability to include conditions that have developed over time, conditions that result from an accident, or conditions that have been present from birth. It includes physical, mental and learning disabilities, and it includes visible, non-visible and perceived disabilities. Episodic disability. An episodic disability is characterized by unpredictable, intermittent and varying degrees of illness and wellness. As a result, there are a number of challenges that both employees and employers must manage, including but not limited to the potential need for the employee to move in and out of the workplace in an unpredictable manner, workload planning and management, availability of flexible work arrangements, income replacement options and insurance benefits coverage. Discrimination. Discrimination in employment is defined as treating people differently, negatively or adversely, in the course of their employment, because of a protected ground, including race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, religion, age, sex, including pregnancy and childbirth, sexual orientation, marital or family status, disability or perceived disability, same-sex partnership status, a record of offenses. Some examples of discriminatory practices include but are not limited to directly or indirectly refusing to employ someone based on a protected ground, asking someone's HIV status on a job application form, terminating someone's employment based on a protected ground. Stigmatization. Stigmatization is to describe or identify an individual in disrespectful terms or as a mark of shame or discredit. Harassment. Harassment means any improper behavior that is directed at and is offensive to an individual and which the person knew or ought reasonably to have known would be unwelcome. Harassment comprises objectionable conduct, comment or display made on either a one-time or continuous basis that demeans, belittles, or causes personal humiliation or embarrassment to an employee based on a prohibited ground of discrimination. Disclose. Webster's Dictionary. To make known, public. At no time is an employee obligated to disclose their specific medical condition. Only relevant and appropriate information explaining the limitations and/or requirements that the employee may have with respect to their ability to fulfill the essential duties of their job need to be provided. Accommodation. A means of removing barriers that prevent persons with disabilities from fully participating in the workplace. Accommodation must be responsive to the individual circumstances of the employee. 1. Employee rights and employer obligations. 1.0 Employee rights and employer obligations Preamble. Company recognizes that an employee with a disability may wish to continue to engage in as many of their normal pursuits as their condition allows, including work. Provided an employee is medically fit for available appropriate work, can perform the essential duties of the job, is able to meet acceptable performance standards, and medical evidence indicates the condition would not be adversely affected by continued employment, company will take all reasonable steps to accommodate continued work and ensure the employee is treated fairly and with dignity and respect. 1.1 Employee rights. Company recognizes that the employee has the following rights. Privacy and confidentiality, if applicable, include policy reference number. Be free from discrimination, stigmatization and/or harassment on any grounds enumerated by the name of the applicable provincial/territorial human rights law. Be free from discrimination, stigmatization and/or harassment on the grounds of association with one or more individuals who themselves are members of groups protected by the name of the applicable provincial/territorial human rights law. For example, if an employee is living with someone who is HIV positive, Human Rights Code. Receive the same insurance benefits coverage provided to other employees subject to any lawful exclusions and/or limitations of the insurer. Be provided reasonable accommodation, as warranted, based on medical confirmations of the employee's ability to continue working and any special workplace facilities or needs that are required. Equal treatment with respect to employment-related issues, which cover job application forms, the process of applying for a job, recruitment and hiring, training, transfers, promotions, terms of apprenticeship, dismissal and layoffs, compensation, leave, benefits, discipline and performance evaluation and/or other terms and conditions of employment as may be applicable in each individual circumstance. 1.2 Company obligations. Company recognizes the following obligations towards its employees. Respect that an employee's health condition is personal and will be treated as confidential and in accordance with company confidentiality policy. Ensure that any information and/or medical evidence provided are maintained as strictly confidential and in accordance with company confidentiality policy. Foster an environment free from discrimination, stigmatization and/or harassment. Ensure that disciplinary action is taken against any person known to discriminate, stigmatize and/or harass any employee with a disability. Administer insurance benefits, ensuring the employee will receive the same benefits coverage provided to other employees, subject to any lawful exclusions and/or limitations of the insurer. Require the employee to disclose only relevant and appropriate information such as prognosis for return to work, as well as any limitations and restrictions that require accommodation. Provide reasonable accommodation and/or any special workplace facilities that may be required in response to an approved request for reasonable accommodation. Protect the rights of all persons with a disability with respect to employment-related issues, which cover job application forms, the process of applying for a job, recruitment and hiring, training, transfers, promotions, terms of apprenticeship, dismissal and layoffs, compensation, leave, benefits, discipline and performance evaluation and/or other terms and conditions of employment as may be applicable in each individual circumstance. 1.3 Discrimination and/or harassment. The name of the applicable provincial/territorial human rights law states that every person has a right to equal treatment with respect to employment without discrimination, and every person who is an employee has a right to freedom from harassment in the workplace by the employer or agent of the employer or by another employee because of the following protected grounds: race, ancestry, national or ethnic origin, color, citizenship, religion, age, sex, including pregnancy and childbirth, sexual orientation, marital or family status, disability or perceived disability or conviction for which a pardon has been granted. Note: some grounds may differ between provinces. Please consult the applicable human rights law in your province or territory. The right to equal treatment with respect to employment covers every aspect of the workplace environment and employment relationship, which includes job application forms, the process of applying for a job, recruitment and hiring, training, transfers, promotions, terms of apprenticeship, dismissal and layoffs, compensation, leave, benefits, discipline and performance evaluation and/or other terms and conditions of employment as may be applicable in each individual circumstance. Company holds all employees responsible for creating a non-discriminatory work environment and will take seriously and investigate any claim of discrimination and/or harassment. Where such a claim is proven, any/all of those involved will be subject to disciplinary action. 1.4 Confidentiality. Note: if your organization has implemented a policy on confidentiality, it should be specifically linked with the confidentiality statement in this policy. If you do not have a specific policy on confidentiality, the wording below can be used. Company respects the right to privacy of former, current and prospective employees. While company encourages a supportive work environment, an employee's medical condition is personal. Until such time as an employee conveys their medical condition or wishes it to be discussed openly with others, any information provided by the employee to the employer must be maintained with a maximum degree of privacy and confidentiality. Any breach of confidentiality will result in disciplinary action that may include the possibility of dismissal. At no time will company record or document for any purposes any details specifying an employee's HIV status. In order to meet its duty to accommodate, company will be required to record and/or document details in regards to an employee's prognosis for return to work or regular work duties, as well as limitations, restrictions, and accommodation requirements, options and resolutions. Any discussion that may take place about an employee's HIV status must be pre-authorized and consented to in writing by the employee. At no time does an employee ask another employee about their HIV status and/or for any employee to disclose specific information about their HIV status unless as specified in workplace accommodation, privacy and confidentiality. 1.5 Designated Health Contact. Company has a designated health contact for employees wishing to discuss their health situation, convey their medical condition, and/or request accommodation in the workplace. This person will be experienced in providing a confidential, supportive environment in which the employee can discuss their situation, ask any questions, seek reassurance and obtain support and/or advice. The designated health contact at company is the title. 1.6 Informing the employer. Anyone who has an illness or disability is required to inform the designated health contact only if and when their condition and/or actions pose a health risk to themselves or others, or when they are no longer capable of performing the essential duties of the job. Refer to workplace accommodation. 2. Workplace accommodation. 2.0 Preamble. Under the name of the applicable provincial/territorial human rights law, persons with disabilities have the right to full integration and participation in society. Respect for the dignity of persons with disabilities is the key to preventing and removing barriers. This includes respect for the self-worth, individuality, privacy, confidentiality and autonomy of persons with disabilities. Accommodation will vary according to a person's unique needs. These needs must be considered, assessed, and accommodated individually. Company may request independent medical confirmation when receiving a request for reasonable accommodation. Accommodation may include, but is not limited to, physical modification of a work site, job modifications, flexible work schedules, extra breaks during the day or altering break schedules, assistive devices, transfer to a different job to reduce stress and/or leaves of absence as defined within existing leave policies. This policy acknowledges the duty of the employer to provide individual accommodation up to the point of undue hardship and the responsibility to minimize the need for individual accommodation by ensuring that any rules, policies, standard responsibilities in the accommodation process. Employers and persons with disabilities have a shared responsibility in making the accommodation process a success. Nothing forces a person to reveal their medical condition. However, when an accommodation is requested, everyone involved should cooperatively share information and actively seek solutions. Company has a designated health contact for employees wishing to discuss their health situation, convey their medical condition, and/or request accommodation in the workplace. This person is experienced in providing a confidential, supportive environment in which the employee can discuss their situation, ask any questions, seek reassurance and obtain support and/or advice. The designated health contact at company is the title. In some cases, the employee may simply want to make the employer aware that there is a health matter or concern and that they may require some extra time for diagnostic testing or time off following a surgical procedure. In these examples, working through existing sick leave policies and/or flexible work schedules may be available. The designated health contact, to the best of their ability, will determine if the request or information provided by the employee should be pursued as a matter of workplace accommodation. 2.1 Employee responsibilities. Company recognizes that the employee has the following responsibilities in the accommodation process. Make any request for accommodation to the employer in writing. See attached template letter. Inform the employer of the employee's needs and relevant restrictions or limitations. Cooperate in obtaining necessary information, including medical and/or other expert opinions. Actively participate in discussions about solutions. To act reasonably and try to minimize any disruptive effect on the workplace. as applicable and or appropriate, assist with workload planning and or redistribution. Meet agreed upon performance objectives and measurements once accommodation is provided. In collaboration with the employer, help to develop an accommodation agreement, and work with the employer on an ongoing basis to manage and monitor the accommodation process to ensure the policy and procedure are being applied correctly. 2.2 Company responsibilities. Company has the following responsibilities in the accommodation process. Maintain the confidentiality of a person with a disability. Accept requests for accommodation in good faith and deal with accommodation requests in a timely manner. Discuss with the employee the purpose and essential functions of the employee's job, the accommodation required, whether or not there are alternatives, and take an active role in ensuring that possible solutions are examined. Request only information that is required to make the accommodation. With the agreement of the employee, obtain expert medical advice or opinion where necessary. Ensure that any medical opinions required will be restricted to the employee's capability to continue working, special workplace facilities, or needs necessary to accommodate the employee's medical condition or protect the health of the employee, co-workers or other individuals with whom the employee has contact. Identify potential accommodation options and assess the effectiveness each would have in allowing an individual to perform the job optimally. Identify any costs, benefits or detriments. Bear the cost of any required medical information or documentation. Develop an accommodation plan and agreement, and manage and monitor the plan to ensure the policy and procedure are being applied correctly. 2.3 Privacy and confidentiality. Any discussion with the designated contact about a health matter or concern is strictly confidential. The designated contact is not permitted to discuss the contents of the meeting with any other employee or person associated with the employer without the expressed written consent of the employee. All documents related to specific requests for accommodation will remain confidential and will only be released to a third party with the written consent of the employee or applicant. Company will comply with all requirements of human resources best practices to protect personal information and adheres to the provisions explained in policy, applicable policy number, confidentiality. To protect the interests of the employee, confidentiality will be maintained throughout the accommodation process to the extent practicable and appropriate under the circumstances. Only those with a need to know will be made aware of the request for accommodation of an employee's limitations and restrictions, such as anyone who is a party to the accommodation process, who is asked to help develop options and who must implement the eventual accommodation chosen. 2.4 Undue hardship. Where a particular means of accommodation is requested, and it has been found that it cannot be met without incurring undue hardship, every effort will be made to provide alternative accommodation up to the point of undue hardship. It is the responsibility of the executive director to make a decision about the likelihood of undue hardship arising by considering the nature and cost of the accommodation as assessed in the context of the size and financial situation of the organization as a whole, safety and or health risks, if any, and who bears them. Any decision to refuse a request for accommodation will be made so only after the Provincial/Territorial Human Rights Commission office has been consulted. 2.5 Recourse rights. Before refusing to provide accommodation, company will ensure that all effective options to accommodate, short of undue hardship, are considered. Where an employee believes that the request for accommodation has not been handled in accordance with this policy and procedure or is not satisfied with the type of accommodation offered, that employee has a right of appeal to an name of the committee, consisting of the board chair or designate, one other board member or executive committee member and a human resources consultant chosen by the employer. The employee must advise the executive director within 5 working days if they want the decision reconsidered by the appeal committee. The employee has the right to make written submissions or to speak to the committee about why the request should be approved. The employee has the right to be accompanied by an advocate. The name of the committee will make its recommendation within number of working days of the appeal. The employee will be informed immediately of the decision. If the appeal is refused, the employee will be advised of their continuing right to make a complaint of employment discrimination under the name of the applicable provincial/territorial human rights law. 3. HIV/AIDS and the workplace. 3.0 The HIV/AIDS and the workplace policy is intended to minimize the possibility of HIV infection, to ensure a supportive work environment, to manage and mitigate the impact of HIV/AIDS in the workplace, to eliminate stigma and discrimination in the workplace on the basis of real or perceived HIV status or vulnerability to HIV infection. 3.1 Principles. The Joint United Nations Programme on HIV/AIDS states, a supportive social, political and legal environment helps individuals to exercise their responsibility to protect themselves and others from HIV infection. Everyone is entitled to enjoy all human rights without discrimination, including discrimination based on actual or suspected HIV infection. The name of the applicable provincial/territorial human rights law is for everyone. HIV/AIDS is defined under the code as a disability. As such, the employee has certain rights under the code. These rights are defined in the policy. 1.1 Employee rights and policy. 1.2 Employer obligations. 3.2 Definition. AIDS stands for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome. AIDS is the advanced stage of the disease caused by the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. This virus seriously damages a person's immune system. Research has shown that there is no evidence that HIV transmission involves insects, food, water, sneezing, coughing, toilets, urine, swimming pools, sweat, tears, shared eating and drinking utensils or other items such as telephones. There is no evidence to suggest that HIV can be transmitted by casual, person-to-person contact in any setting, including shaking hands or hugging. 3.3 HIV/AIDS screening, recruitment, and employment. Company, workplace approach to HIV/AIDS is based on current public health aspects of HIV/AIDS. The only medical criteria for recruitment and employment are fitness to work and the ability to perform the essential duties of the job. As such, since HIV infection is not spread by ordinary workplace activities, there is no basis for screening tests. ICAT does not require pre- and or post-employment HIV/AIDS screening or testing for any employee or candidate for employment. 3.4 Education and awareness. Company recognizes a number of concerns that may be present in the workplace. These concerns may include, but are not limited to, risk of HIV infection, a safe working environment for all, how/where to obtain current health information, fair and equal treatment of individuals who are HIV positive, respect, confidentiality. In order to support all employees, company is committed to ensuring HIV/AIDS related education and awareness in the workplace. This education will be ongoing to ensure the most current research and education is provided. Comprehensive, accurate, given organization time, available. 3.5 Prevention and first aid. HIV is transmitted from an infected person to someone else through sexual intercourse, including semen donation, through blood, principally blood transfusions and non-sterile injection equipment, also includes organ or tissue transplant, and from infected mother to infant during pregnancy, at birth or through breastfeeding. Company will provide employees with sensitive, accurate and up-to-date information to enable them to protect themselves from HIV and other sexually transmitted or bloodborne infections. First aid precautions. All employees will take the following precautions as appropriate. Universal precautions must be followed: the prevention of HIV infection. Latex, vinyl or plastic gloves, available in first aid kit, must be worn if exposure of blood to the skin is a possibility. First aid should be administered without delay. Any blood on the skin must be washed off with hot soapy water as soon as possible. Any materials or surfaces soiled should be washed with a disinfecting solution, 110 dilute bleach. Blood-stained clothes or clothes should be rinsed out in cold water and then laundered normally. Blood-stained disposable gloves, towels or any other disposable material or garments should be placed in a plastic bag, closed with a twist tie and placed in regular garbage. Seek medical advice regarding post-exposure prophylaxis. First aid kit. Company. First aid kit is located in state location. As the designated health contact, the title will ensure that this kit is monitored and restocked on a routine basis. 3.6 Care and support in the workplace. While company encourages a supportive work environment, an employee's health status is personal. Until such time as an employee discloses their health status or wishes it to be discussed openly, any information provided by the employee to the employer must be kept strictly confidential at all times. To the extent requested and to the extent possible, company will encourage employees to seek out services and/or resources that are available in the community to assist any employee living with HIV/AIDS. Company acknowledges that HIV/AIDS impacts male and female staff differently. This includes the recognition that women normally undertake the major part of caring for those with AIDS-related illnesses, and pregnant women with HIV have additional specific needs. Any support programs available will take into consideration unique individual requirements. It is recognized that these requirements may change over time. In order to respond to these changes, company will ensure that discussions around appropriate levels of support are continued on an ongoing basis at the organization.